Good evening. Notice is hereby given of the special meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey at 7:45 p.m. on Tuesday, October the 4th, 2011, in the boardroom of the Administration Building, 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey. The purpose of the meeting is to immediately move into private session. The public portion of the meeting will begin at 8 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Friday, September the 30th, 2011, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education, located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, the Town Clerk of Westfield, the editor at thealternativepress.com, and patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of this meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Matesic? Here. Ms. Carey?
Here.
Mrs. Clancy?
Here.
Mr. Finn?
Here.
Mr. Friedman?
Here.
Ms. Kerstadt?
Here.
Mrs. Lights? Mr. Slater?
Here.
Thank you. As previously mentioned, we do have a private session, so I would ask the board to approve the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education move into a private session for the purposes of discussing personnel, litigation, or negotiations, and be it further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential, and the results of the discussion be made public as soon as practicable. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We will reconvene at 8 p.m. So it is now 8:10, and we are back from our private session, and we are on the public portion of the agenda, and we are at the flag salute. So, Ms. Clancy, could you lead us in the flag salute, please?
Stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Do we have any announcements around the table? Great. Thank you.
Westfield High School senior Dan Burke has reached the $20,000 mark in donations to charities resulting from baseball games he has coordinated for the last 6 years. Dan's work on the fundraiser begins in July and ends in September when the annual game is held. In addition to the entry fee Dan charges the players, he organizes a raffle with donations from local businesses as well as a silent auction. Approximately 75 to 100 people have attended, myself included, or participated in the baseball game every year with teams composed of friends and parents. Police officers challenged the student players 2 of the 6 years. Every year, a different charity was chosen based on recommendations Dan would receive. This year, close to $5,000 was raised for Furniture Assist, which provides furnishings for those in need in the local area. Congratulations to Dan for his hard work and success in helping others.
Thank you. Anyone else? Great.
8 Westfield High School seniors have been named semifinalists in the National Merit Scholarship Program, and I'm going to apologize right up front because I'm sure I'm going to butcher a couple of these. They are Thomas Edwards, Gina Gao, Catherine Jarelski, Hannah Margolin, Kathleen Tang, Leonidas Tolius, Brian Vanderschaff, and Nicholas Zahorodny. According to the National Merit Scholarship Corporation, the nationwide pool of semifinalists represents less than 1% of U.S. high school seniors and includes the highest scoring entrants in each state on the preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship qualifying test. They will have an opportunity to continue in the competition to become a finalist for 2012 Merit Scholarship Awards that will be offered in the spring. Congratulations to these fine scholars.
Thank you.
Another congratulations to the Lady Blue Devils tennis team, who captured a resounding 7th straight Union County tournament crown on September 27th with a total of 88 points. The second place team tallied 68 points. We wish our girls continued success on and off the court.
The Westfield High School Counseling Services Department is presenting its 26th Annual Financial Aid Information Program on Thursday, October 13th at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium. The new guest speaker for this year's program will be a representative from Monmouth University's Financial Aid Office, who will review the details and resources for financing a college education. The speaker will also explain the process of completing the FAFSA free application for federal student aid form. Additionally, a member from the Westfield High School Counseling Services will discuss additional resources for accessing scholarship information. There'll be time for questions as well, and this information will certainly be very helpful for parents of juniors and seniors who may soon be applying for financial aid and scholarships.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Then I want to mention that all Westfield schools will be closed on Monday, October the 10th, in observance of Columbus Day, and that the next Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, October the 18th, here at 302 Elm Street at 8 o'clock. All right. Now we can recognize the public for agenda items. And seeing no one approach the podium, Dr. Dolan, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you. And we have two superintendent reports this evening. It was just last week, a mere 7 days ago, where we had a superintendent report regarding the goals for this year in the district. And one of those goals deals with respect, making sure that throughout our community that we all focus on understanding the importance of respect. In addition, the legislators from New Jersey have designated this week the Week of Respect for New Jersey public schools. So I'm just going to provide a quick summary as the first report as to some of the activities that are going on throughout our schools in Westfield this week regarding the Week of Respect. And I'll start with the high school. The Week of Respect at Westfield High School began with a school-wide announcement to students by the principal which emphasized respecting ourselves, respecting our school, and respecting our school community. And each and every student will engage in a conversation or activity related to respect in their English classes. And if those of us who have been out of high school for a while reflect, most of what I learned in English could easily be tied to topics regarding respect, and almost in one way or another. Other classes will also be addressing the topic through class discussions as it may be appropriate. On Friday, all freshmen will participate in a transition project outreach group. The topic of the discussion will be friendship, with the goal of increasing awareness and sensitivity regarding the ways people treat one another. And on Friday, several Westfield High School student leaders from a variety of extracurricular activities will be going to Edison Intermediate School to participate in their culminating Week of Respect assembly. And speaking of those intermediate schools, students at the intermediate schools are beginning their mornings with inspirational quote or words of wisdom which focus on giving respect to get respect. Counselors are teaching lessons to their respective students on pertinent topics such as respect, empathy, and personal power. Classroom activities are also being done, and a culminating activity entitled Rally for Respect will take place on Friday, and the focus of the rally will be a panel discussion by former students on the importance of respect. At our elementary schools, at the elementary school, announcements are being made throughout the week which involve the value of respect, tolerance, caring, and the celebration of individual differences. Assemblies or family meetings will be held by building principals and anti-bullying specialists with students at different grade levels. At these assemblies, students are learning about our code of conduct, our respect for one another, and they're discussing the definition of bullying behavior. Those discussions are grade specific, as you might imagine. If you compare our first graders to our fifth graders, there's really a world of difference. Our special education teachers are also involved in this at the elementary level. At the library, for example, they're reading stories to children that highlight respectful behavior exhibited by characters in the story. In music, they're singing songs. I really did not know there was a song called Character Tango, but now I do know that. And even in Spanish, some of the phrases being learned this week in Spanish are phrases that are respectful phrases. Also, students are creating posters about respect that are being hung throughout hallways, and age-appropriate books are being linked to that as well. And our little ones, it really does start when they're quite little. At the Early Childhood Learning Center at Lincoln School, the librarians are reading books to their students, talking about manners, about being an individual, and about being happy with whom they are. In classrooms, the teachers are introducing the word respect through class discussions, And the class discussions are going to cover the 6 pillars of character education. That is treating others with respect, being tolerant and accepting of differences, using good manners, being considerate of the feelings of others, don't threaten, hit, or hurt anyone, and to deal peacefully with anger and disagreements. And some of the classes are planning a garden of good manners where students will put respectful words on flowers to be displayed on bulletin boards in their classrooms. Now again, this is just a summary of specific activities this week for the Week of Respect. But that work continues throughout our schools throughout the year. It's very important, and we certainly don't do all the work. Certainly the students learn from all of the adults in the community, especially certainly from their parents and their families. And I appreciate the fact that the entire community does work to make sure that our students learn the importance of respecting themselves, others, their school, and their community.
A lot going on.
Yes, that's right. I'm pausing for a moment, and then before I move on to the second superintendent report. Okay. Our second report this evening is actually a report on the assessments that were conducted last spring, and Mrs. O'Neill, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Programs, is going to be presenting that, and she'll be joining us at the table.
Good evening. Thought I'd begin this presentation today to kind of give you an overview of the ever-changing world of assessment in New Jersey and in the country. Those of you who have been watching and following this, it really started a while ago with the early legislation, which was called Elementary Secondary Education Act. Then it was revised and changed under President George Bush to be called No Child Left Behind. And we've been operating under the No Child Left Behind premise up until now. And currently, the No Child Left Behind bill or act is in the process of being revised. I just got something just before I came down. It says that by October 18th, they think the bill will go back to the committee to talk about revision. And the reason why I'm just giving you a little bit of overview is that's how the states, particularly our state, really is governed by the testing requirements that exist throughout the district and throughout the state. One of the things that's taking place now is that President Obama has issued, I guess it's an executive order that allows states, if they so choose, by October 12th to submit a request for a waiver. And the waiver is to the current NCLB law. If states throughout the nation apply for that waiver, it means that they have to take the waiver in total, and there are 10 parts to that. And what the waiver really will do is allow for modifications of the current No Child Left Behind Act. And I bring that up because as I go over the testing, you'll see why that's current. But I just want to tell you about, there are 4 of those current parts of the waiver that may be pertinent to New Jersey, and particularly to us. One of them looks at the annual yearly progress indicator, and it is offering flexibility if a state adopts all 10 waivers. The other one talks about flexibility in the implementation of the School Improvement Act, and that again talks about if a school is deemed failing for whatever because they did not make AYP, this waiver will allow them to make some changes. The third one talks about how the local education agency can also have flexibility in making improvements and determining how the dollars are spent. And the fourth one, which would probably affect us as well, has to do with the highly qualified teacher portion of this waiver, which now says that if in fact it's adopted, districts can determine how they will use their Title I and their Title IIA funds. And you will see on the agenda that we have listing about how we are using a portion of our Title I funds for class size reduction. But this waiver will allow for a lot more flexibility, as it used to be, where you could use the money as you so deemed. So that what's going on is that there's a lot of changes coming about, and some of those changes will affect the presentation I'm giving you today. So I just wanted to give you an overview of what that's all about. We'll start off with the HESPA, which is the high school proficiency test for all students who are in 11th grade or new 12th graders who enter the district. I'm going to give you a little information about what this test, I don't think I've done that in a while, what the test really measures. If you look at the math component really looks at number and numerical operations. It looks at geometry and algebraic expressions. It actually covers things like logic, discrete math, probability, and problem solving. The language arts section begins with and looks at the reading component, both reading from text, being able to analyze and synthesize information, newspaper articles, as well as magazines. And I tell you that because as we go through the grades, you will see the connection that from our very, very early learners, those similar tasks and components of the testing exist in each grade level. So it ends with our 11th graders. This year, you can see that, again, our students in the math area performed above state standards at 91.9%, and the state the state average is 75.2, and our scale score mean is 245, and the state scale score mean is 228. I think you can see it, but you have it in front of you. As we look at language arts, again, our students are scoring well above the state standards, 96.9 in the language arts area, and the scale score being 244.1. Let me explain a little bit about what happens with the HESPA. All students who are in 11th grade for the first time are required to take the HESPA testing. Any student who moves into the district, let's say in the 12th grade, who was not in a New Jersey school, who was not in the state of New Jersey, who was not in the country of New Jersey, has to take the HESPA in 12th grade if they are going to seek a New Jersey diploma. Same thing happens for our out-of-district youngsters who are in other states, as far as, I don't know, Wyoming, Nevada, Utah. If they're going to get a Westfield diploma, they must sit for the high school proficiency test, either in 11th grade or 12th grade. I've talked to you before about the new, we change names all the time in this state with all these tests. It used to be called the end-of-course exam for biology. Well, last year they changed it to the New Jersey Biology Competency Test. And this test was part and still is part of the American Diploma Policy program that the state was involved in. And what happens with this is whenever any youngster takes a biology or a life science course, any grade that they take that in, at the end of that test course, they must take what is known as a competency or the biology competency test. This particular data means that our 8th grade youngsters who are in the gifted program take this test because they take biology in 8th grade. Any child who's in any special ed class who takes a life science course, when they complete that course, they take this test. So this test ranges from 8th grade students all the way up to 12th grade because it depends on the year that you complete the course. This testing, the data for this is very limited in terms of what the state provides, but it does tell us that according to our district factor, we are again above state standards, and we are above the DFG in overall, and we are significantly above the state total.
I wonder if we should just quickly explain what DFG, District Factor Grouping, what that stands for.
Okay. The district factor grouping stands for what the state really looks at are they put you in a category based on socioeconomic levels, family backgrounds, and communities that are similar. And when we look at districts like that, they have the same, usually socioeconomic mean level. educational backgrounds, and the performance in the schools are very similar. And in that grouping that we are in, we still are scoring even above that high-performing district factor group that we're in. We're above them. I guess I've talked about the Algebra One test. Now, that's still called the end-of-course exam. Not only is the name sort of obsolete, so is the test. This was the last admission of the Algebra 1 and the last admission of the Algebra 2. And I hope no one gets too excited, because that just means that we finished with that. But we are entering into a new partnership as of 2013, perhaps, when the first test comes out, because New Jersey is part of the 49-state group that adopted the Common Core standards. And based on that, the Common Core standards, all of the testing that you're going to see tonight will eventually be under the guidance and the testing coordination of, now let me see if I get this right, it's called PARC, Partnership for Assessment for Readiness of Career and College and Careers. We can't make anything simple. So it's called PARC, and that may change, but that's the name of it now. As we look at the Algebra 1 exam, this particular test over time has had the most controversy in terms of reliability and the reporting of the results. The problem with this particular test is based on the fact that, again, like the biology, whenever a youngster completes Algebra 1, whatever grade they completed, they were required to take the test. So in our case, we have 7th graders who took this test because they were in our gifted program and they complete algebra in 1 year. We have 8th graders who took the test who completed algebra over 2 years. We have 9th graders who took the test for the first time because they took algebra in high school. We have 10th graders, 11th graders, and even 2 12th graders who were taking Algebra 1 for the first time. So it has a wide spectrum of students who participated. The basic components of it are operations on numbers and expressions, linear relationships, and nonlinear relationships. Again, the way this particular test is reported is a little different than some of the others. The range for the algebra test is, Algebra 1, is 300 to 839. The median score for the students in Westfield, 526 of them from grades 7 to 12 who took this test, was 484. 63% of the students were proficient or above. It's very difficult to make any kind of real studies or to really make any real come to any conclusion about what this measures, because again, we're looking at a wide range of students and the test has changed over time. As a district, we did not participate in the Algebra 2, which was for the last 3 years really a pilot, so there's no data. We didn't have students taking the Algebra 2 test. We're moving into now the New Jersey Ask. And New Jersey Ask, students in grades 3 through 8 participate in this particular testing. It occurred last year in a new format in terms of the time frame. It was the first time that the tests were given in a very, very tight time frame, 2 weeks, rather than over time. We used to spread it out. We had to actually test all the grades at once. We did get a permission from the state to not test the 5th graders when all the other students were tested, but that was the first time. They have reverted back to the original testing schedule, so this year's testing will be over 3 weeks. When I talk a little bit about this particular test, I want to revert back to the HESPA. When you look at the results of the HESPA and you take a look at the data on the HESPA is the most reliable in terms of not changing of all the tests that New Jersey has been giving over the past years. For the last several years, the HESPA has been consistent. The only thing that you will see different in the HESPA over time is once in a while there'll be a field-tested question. But for the most part, the data on the HESPA has been reliable. And what I mean by that is you can draw some conclusions from year to year based on the test, because the test was not one that went through a lot of changes. The test that is probably the most erratic has been 3 through 8, because, and more 3, 4, and 5 than even 7 and 8. The testing has changed, and they've added many different field tests, many components to the testing over the years. So it's been very difficult to compare from year to year what the third grade test was last year and the third grade test would be this year. And what has happened over the last 3 years, is that we don't find out that they changed the test until after we receive the results. And then they said, oh, by the way, we changed certain things in the test. So that's why when you look at the scores, you will see a lot of differences. And later on, I will really point that out a little bit more about why the tests were inconsistent. But again, if you take a quick look, you will see that in language arts 3 to 8, we actually measure what I was talking about in the HESPA. Expository writing, working with text, analyzing text. Speculative writing is introduced in the 5th through 8th grade HESPA, the New Jersey ASK, and persuasive writing is introduced from 6 to 8. So you get an idea that our students start around 6th grade being measured on persuasive writing, and then it is again affirmed in the 11th grade. Mathematics, 3 to 8, the categories are almost identical to the HESPA. You will see number and numerical operations, geometry and measurement, patterns and algebra, data analysis, probability, discrete mathematics, and problem solving. So those are the things, those are the items, those are the test questions that appear on the HESPA. In grades 4 and 8, we also have an additional test, and that is the science test. And the science test really covers, interesting enough, life science, physical science, earth science, knowledge, and application. And historically, with this particular test, you will see that students tend to do much better on the science test consistently over years. We'll start with the 8th grade, and we take a look at the language arts. As we look at both of our middle schools, we see that we are above state standards, again, at 94.2. Our mean score is 236, and again, we are above the state in every area. You can note some of the partially proficient, the proficient, and the advanced proficient scores are available. We see similar things as we take a look at the mathematics, but the mathematics, again, is above state standard, and the differences in the test become a lot more evident as we move up the grades, and you will see different things, that the math scores are a lot different than the language arts. And that's the 8th grade science, and you can see that, again, district-wide, the district above state standard score is 93.8. 7th grade, similar to our 8th grade, again, the district above state standards is 87.1, and the state standard is 63.3. You see it again in mathematics, 87.9, and the state is 65.7. As we look at 6th grade, similar. The language arts is 83.6, and the state is 66.7. And you see the same thing, a little higher in the math, 93.3, as opposed to the state 77.4. As we move to 5th grade, the district standard is 86.9, and the state is 60.9, and you can look at our elementary schools. They are very, very similar in the area of language arts as you look at the above state standard. As we move along in math, you see very similar scores between the schools, and we are 95.1% above the state in the area of mathematics, 5th grade. 4th grade, similar, 83.7 is the district and 62.7 is the state. 4th grade this year was one of those tests where there were some changes in the actual design of the test. There was a change last year and the year before in both 4th and 3rd. 4th grade again, our district factor, our district standard is 93.9, and the state is 79.3. Our fourth grade science numbers are impressive, but look at our 96.4, but as you take a look at the state, this is one of those tests, as I said, that tends to be pretty standard, and students across the state are scoring quite well in the area of the sciences, what they're measuring at fourth grade. We take a look at third grade, again, we're 83.7, and the state is 63. And as we take a look at the mathematics, it's 92.4, and the state is 78.9. Let's spend a few minutes talking about annual yearly progress, and I'll loop back to what I spoke to about before. One of the components of the No Child Left Behind Act indicates and states that all children, regardless of what grade they're in, what their educational background is, whether they are English language learners, whether they are special ed children who are unable to perform anywhere near grade level, by the year 2014 will score a proficient score in every area that's measured by the state, by the test, and that they will be proficient regardless if they start out reading 3 grade levels below. They're not measured on, they're not assessed on a test that is where they're reading. They're assessed at the grade level that they are supposed to be in. So if they're a second grader, if they're a fifth grader and they're reading on a second grade level, they're taking a fifth grade test, and they have to be proficient on every component of that. That is part of this whole waiver component of what the ESEA and the President is talking about, making a change. Because, let's take a look at language arts and spend a couple of minutes on it. In 2002-2003, grades 3, 4, and 5 were tested in language arts literacy. And the passing score, the percentage of children who had to be proficient in 2002-2003 was 68%. And in 2004-2006, it was 75%. Now let's take a look at 2007-2009. That was the year when the state of New Jersey changed all of the language arts 3-4 test, and they applied to the state for a waiver and they applied to the federal government, excuse me, to the Department of Ed for a one-time waiver to readjust the AYP score, and they did. We were granted that. So in 2007-2009, it went back to 59% of the students had to be proficient in grades 3, 4, and 5. That's why the asterisk, and that's what happened. But now let's look at 2010, 2013. It went from 59% in 2009 to 79%, and that's every child who takes this test, and no child is exempt from taking the test. And then you see from 2013, if the state of New Jersey does not apply for a waiver, they will be held to the 100% passing rate for every child. You see the difference. You can see the progression in language arts 6, 7, and 8. It went from 58, 66, 72, 86 this year, and 100% starting in the year 2013. 11th grade went from 73% to 92%. That's this current year. Of the students who take this test have to be proficient in all elements. And you see the same thing happen in math when in the year where the grades 3, 4, and 5 received the change or an adjustment to the AYP to 83%.
So can I jump in for 1 second? Only because I know in previous years I've gotten emails after the presentation, and it can be confusing. You know? So even though you've said it, I'm going to just reiterate. So the numbers that were on that last slide, they aren't how our students did. Those are the state standards that are required, and it shows how the state standards have changed over the years. It has nothing to do with our results. Those are just the standards, and you can see how they've varied over the years, and how they're, as Mrs. O'Neill has said, how they're all headed to every child, regardless of their background, as you said, their special cases. Every child will be able to pass every test.
So as we look at the annual yearly progress results for 2011, we're taking all of those things in consideration. All of our schools achieved AYP. All schools met the total participation indicator. And let me explain that for a quick moment. What that particular component of this annual yearly progress and the testing report means, that every child has to sit for the test of their grade level, regardless of where they are or what their educational concerns may be. That being said, we have students who are out of district. They will come back, or we will go to them, and they will take the test at the grade level that they are supposed to take. We have met the 100% participation, and that's not easy to do. That's every kid, whether they're on home instruction, because we will send the home instructor to them with the secure test to take the test. That is very, very big. There are many districts that do not meet that all schools total participation indicator. 6 of our elementary, 2 of our intermediate schools achieved AYP in mathematics in all subgroups. Every subgroup that was looked at, because part of No Child Left Behind not only looks at your total school enrollment and who took the test, they look at every subgroup, and they define that in many ways. Subgroups can be by gender, race, ethnicity, English language learner, migrant worker, non-migrant worker. There are many, many components, and you have to meet every one of those subgroups. Must make AYP, and subgroup is made up of 30 children who take the test at that point. 4 of our elementary, 2 of our intermediate schools, and the high school achieved AYP in language arts literacy in all subgroups. Some subgroups in grades 3 and 5 and 11 did not achieve AYP in one of the assessed areas. I've spent some time talking about the results, but I want to briefly tell you how we use this data, because we do. We use it to assess our curriculum ongoing, all the time. You will remember that last year we came to you with a proposal to take a look at our morning BISA program at the intermediate level. We revised it, we worked at it, we analyzed the data both before and after, and we're very pleased with the results of the children who took the test this year in the intermediate schools. Did extremely well. And we are able to chart that information because we took a look at where they started in 5th grade, how they did in 6th grade, how they did in 7th grade, and how they did in 8th grade. We use it to, of course, assess the implementation. So as part of our overall review, we took a look at how they actually did in school and how they're doing now, and what the teachers say, and how they feel about the testing. And I want to say that that's important because although we have to assess all our children, and we do that with a lot of dignity and time, it can be stressful for children and for parents. And being able to feel good about going into the testing situation is important for every child to be successful. And we really feel that some of the things that we've been doing by looking at the data has helped us to ensure that. And we also analyze the student results to provide remediation, and we provide remediation on any levels, from our Achieve, our Title I, to BISIP in the high school, to the intermediate program. If students need it, we provide it. So, in conclusion, we believe and are happy to talk about the excellence and the overall continued success in talking about something and working with something as difficult and complex as assessment is. but our students continue to thrive. We do, whether it's No Child Left Behind or the Elementary Education, Secondary Education Act, we do look at every child. And even though the testing sometimes can be, the results can be much more negative in terms of punitive results of testing, we know that every child matters, and we absolutely take it seriously and watch it and look at it.
Thank you.
Next question. I was going to say, there's a lot in here. Go ahead.
I think I'm confusing myself at this point on the end, on a couple of the end slides.
Okay?
By 2013, we have to have total participation and 100% proficiency.
Yes,
So we have total participation today.
yes,
We don't have 100% proficiency today.
that's correct.
We're not applying for a waiver.
I don't know. That's a state's choice. The state of New Jersey has not announced whether they are applying.
So it's not district.
It's not a
by
district. If it was district, we would definitely, I'm sure, apply.
Okay.
It is a state, and the state has to agree to all the tenets of the waivers. I gave you just 4 of them, but there are 10 of them. It gives states much more flexibility. Some states have already applied, and then they will assess, they will judge your application through the months of November through February.
Fine. So until we know that, I don't know that I have any more questions. Right. Thank you.
Okay. I have, well, that answered that one. I guess I'm confused about how the Algebra 1 test, since our kids take Algebra 1 in the 8th grade, is so different from our NJX scores in math. Why is there a disconnect between the two? I mean, it's Algebra 1.
Well,
Isn't that what's in the 8th grade? I mean, did I misunderstand?
you're talking about how the NJS scores are so high
Right.
and the Algebra 1, yes. The two, they're very different tests.
Completely.
Totally. The NJS measures overall mathematical, those things that I talked about, those components, where the Algebra 1 test is not a state test, it's a national test. And it looks at the body of what someone has deemed to be the essence of algebra. And it is not specific to necessarily what's been taught all the time in the same way in all the states. And the states have been looking at it. I think that's one of the reasons why they're fading out. We looked at it, Regina, Dr. Keychek has looked at it. Across the state, that 63% proficiency was high.
Yes.
It was much lower across the state. Now, again, this is not a test that was devised by us. It's done by the American Diplomacy Project, and no one has been able to really talk about why it's such a discrepancy from what children do in a classroom and how they do on that particular test.
And how they do in other assessments as well, both not only NJASC, but the National Assessment NAEP. You don't find a pattern at all. The results are very different. And as Mrs. O'Neill said, and the state of New Jersey and other states have determined to move on to a different assessment.
I don't mean this to focus on a negative, I hate doing that, but when I see 4 elementary, 2 intermediate, and high school and language arts, I guess the obvious question, we have 6 elementary schools, so has it been looked at, I mean, is that part of the overgoing reach for the next year to understand why those 2 schools, did they miss by a half a point, was it?
Well, the subgroups miss it.
Right.
So when you're talking about a subgroup, depending on which subgroup it is, you have to take a look at where as I said to you, if you're talking, let's take the subgroup of special education.
Right.
If you are in the 6th grade, but you are functioning in math on the 4th grade, you're not going to pass the 6th grade math test, no matter what you do. Because
it
you're being
doesn't-
assessed at the
Right.
6th grade level.
And it doesn't mean you don't continue to work with
Yeah.
the children, but there are some students, which is part of the reason why the federal government is now offering the waivers, because you work with every child to bring them to their potential. But if you have a child, and special education is a very good example of a subgroup, if you have some children in special education, if they really are at a different level, you work with them, you work with them, and then when you look at the scores, you make a judgment as to is that where they should be? Is this the, you'd like to ask, is this the right assessment for them? But it doesn't allow us to do that. And that's really what's driving the federal movement towards the waiver.
So it's a matter of subgroups, not, when I see 4 elementary, it doesn't mean that 4 out of 6 or
Correct.
anything like that. It just has to do with the way the subgroups are divided.
Yes, correct. And the state, I think Dr. Dolan mentioned it a little bit earlier, last week, and the state, part of the waiver movement in terms of what it looks at, is also talking about a growth model. And a growth model really takes a look at, depending on which one you select, it looks at individual. Hopefully, it looks at, and the federal government's position is that you take a look at how each person is doing over time, as opposed to necessarily just looking at it in how they compare to each other.
So, Ms. O'Neill, is there a consequence when we don't achieve AYP? Do they, more specifically, do they cut our funding? I mean, is federal funding held back?
Currently, you have to not achieve AYP for more than 1 year.
Oh,
So the first year, no. The second year, they look at you closely, and there's some things you may have to do. If you are the third year, then you are a school who may need to be in need of improvement. That is one of the things that the federal government is saying, that just because a school is doing very, very well, and let's take, we have, I don't know, a migrant working population by nature would be moving from place to place, and they're in this town, and they're 30 in the 6th grade, and they don't make AYP. Does that mean the entire system is not doing well? There are reasons why they may not be making AYP. Not that they're not capable, but that the fact that they're migrant means that they've had maybe a spotty education. So it's really taking a look at what does it mean? What does annual yearly progress really mean?
so I'm sorry, so the first year, there's no monetary consequence?
No.
Is there a monetary consequence in the second
No.
year, or not until the third?
In the third year, really, very few people get there if in fact it's a subgroup and you're making some progress, but it can happen.
I think, as you said, they're also looking at changing those. There are set rules for if it's 3 years, if it's 4 years, if it's 5 years, but they are looking to change those as well, because I think they've been finding that in many cases, we certainly haven't been in that position, we're not experts at it, but in many cases it did not seem to be helpful or effective. So they're looking at changing those, the consequences for those schools and/or districts who are in that.
Thank you.
So just a couple quick questions. My first question is, what happens if a student doesn't pass the HESPAs? So they've come to their senior year and they're still partially proficient, because I believe there used to be an action.
Yes, there still is. If, currently, if a youngster takes the 11th grade test and they are not proficient, they are immediately placed in BISIP if they are not already in Basic Skills Improvement instruction. They must take the HESPA again in October. We are in the middle of the resubmission of, or retaking of the HESPA right now. It's just started today. They will take it again as a 12th grader while they're in BISIP, or Basic Skills Improvement Program, and then the results are reviewed. If they do not become proficient again, they are placed in what is called the alternate ASHA, Alternate Student Assessment Program, and that really takes a look at the components of the test where they were not proficient. It's not a total retake of the test yet, although they may have to take it in March. They get 3 chances. But when they look at the ASHA, they may, let's say you're having great difficulty with expository writing and reading prompts, that's where the student keeps failing. They give you a chance to work with them and take mini tests over a period of time to see whether or not you really do have that skill, but you are unable to demonstrate it by way of the test. If you still don't pass the ASHA, then in March you take the HESPA again, And if you are not proficient, you cannot graduate until you can pass the
Pass
test.
the test. And then do they offer another opportunity at that point, or?
You can always return and take it, or you can take it in adult school, but you can come back to your high school and participate in the ASHA again and take the
To
test.
take the HESA. I see. And then my second question is just for clarification. So we have the national testing, which is the HESPA.
The national,
That is a national?
no, it's state.
It's a state.
Mhm.
Okay, HESPA is a state. The Algebra One was a national.
Yes.
And our NJ asks are all state. So now, the New Jersey is participating in a state adoption of the Common Core standards.
Correct.
Does that mean that the testing is going to change to a national test?
Yes.
So there will no longer be NJ asks?
Right. It's going to be part of the park.
And that's what the park is?
Yes.
I see. And is there any indication of what year that might be?
They're aiming for phasing it in. They hope to have by 2013-14. Actually, they have a problem. HESPA was supposed to end this year because that's when the contract was determined to end, and they thought they would be ready to move on, but they're not. So the last word I heard is that they're going to reauthorize HESPA for 2 years to be ready for the park assessment in 2014, and they will phase it in.
So the park assessment will just be for?
It's going to be for
it's
everything.
Oh, it will be for everything?
Right.
So,
But they're phasing them in various levels. And what they're going to do, at least allegedly at this point, is they're moving towards, they would like to have the park assessments be much more online-based, but that's more to come. I'm not sure when they will do that. They've talked about it originally, 2013, they were going to try to have some of the tests ready. I don't know.
Right, and certainly the superintendents have been asking for more information regarding that, because it certainly has implication as we're looking at our technology, and we've talked about that at this table. We need to know what the expectations are going to be, and not just Westfield, but districts across, certainly the state and other states need to know what the expectations for technology will be for those tests.
and just hope that through the transitioning that they aren't going to have our students take both tests.
Well,
Maybe in the
yes.
same year.
Yeah.
Because I already feel
Yeah.
over-tested.
They're thinking about, or at least they're talking about having the authorization of HESPA have some of the park components to it, but, you know, it's all speculation.
My question is a little more detail-oriented, I apologize. Over the years, we just don't see a wide variation between our schools, really. I mean, I'm afraid to use the word statistically significant, since I have no background in that at all. But under grade 4, language arts, there seems to be a big difference between our elementary schools, that more than a few points here and there. Do we know why? In that one grade, in that one subject, I mean, it's the only anomaly in all of this. They are all clustered otherwise. But this one, there's, gosh, a 20-point spread or something?
Well, the principals are at work looking
Okay.
at that. They've been looking at that a lot. They've been interesting, each of them has a little bit different, interesting story, but they are doing analysis of why that particular grade in at least 3 of the schools, and what's different about them.
So we
They
might
don't have it- you-
we'll hear about it later,
I think
maybe?
so,
Okay,
yes.
great. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I would ask the board to approve the minutes of the special board meeting held on July the 7th, 2011, and the private minutes from the meeting held July the 7th, 2011. May I have a second, please? Second. Thank you. All those in favor?
I abstain.
Okay.
Yep.
Any opposed? You abstain?
Just on the ones that are there.
Yes, on July 7th? Okay.
We just would ask for modification on the private session minutes that I was absent, that I was not present.
Oh, to show that you were.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Ms. Clancy, Personnel.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to ask for the board's approval of personnel items number 1 through 11. Second.
Second.
Just want to make a quick note on item number 10. Just a clarification that the compensation for the overnight school field trip is coming out of field trip money. It is a line item of student activity fund, but we didn't want it to be confused with student activity fee. So,
Right.
yeah, so it's field trip money. And I also just wanted to note on personnel item number 1 that we are reappointing our energy education managers, and just to continue to congratulate them on the hard work that they do for our district and the positive energy that they spread. That really has helped to work towards a change in the culture in all of the buildings. I even think there's some competition that goes on. I think we're up over $1.6 million in savings over the course. I think we're into our 6th year. And so we really continue to be very excited about their work and thank them for their dedication towards it.
Thank you.
That's it, yeah.
Any questions, comments about personnel?
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Slater?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Matesic?
Yes.
Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mr. Finn?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman?
Yes.
Ms. Kerstad?
Yes. Mrs. Clancy, Facilities.
Yes, Facilities has a change in their meeting. We will now be meeting on Tuesday, October 18th at 7 p.m. prior to our board meeting.
Mrs. Lights is not here, and I assume there is no report to be made. So, having not reviewed this beforehand about the actual procedure, is it a affirm? We just, all those in favor vote, or a roll call vote?
I would suggest you do a roll call.
Okay, I would ask the board then to affirm the superintendent's decision on the incidents listed below, having had these discussions in private session and having, under the terms of the new policy, the HIB policy, to affirm the superintendent's decision.
I'll second.
Thank you. And may we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Yaniro?
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Finn?
Yes.
Mr. Matesic?
Yes.
Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman?
Yes.
Ms. Kerstad?
Yes.
Mr. Slater?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Carey, curriculum.
Yes, we have a meeting on the 13th, and so I guess we'll have a report at the next meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Finance, Mr. Matesic.
All right. Ask the board to consider finance motions 1 through 4.
Second.
Before I go into item number 1, let me ask if there's any questions on items 2 through 4. All right. With respect to item 1, the allocation of additional state aid in the amount of $845,449. I just want to give a little background on that first. So, in previous board meetings, we had discussed 2 buckets of funds. One was from the surplus fund from the 2010-2011 school year that ended June 30, 2011. And the current expectation of surplus to be confirmed by auditors in December is a preliminary number, but that's $3.6 million. The current expected allocation to the maintenance reserve, the capital account to be finalized by the board in December, is $2.2 million. And we've talked about that number before. This isn't new information. The current expected remainder to be allocated to tax relief is $1.4 million. And that relief will go into the 2012-2013 school budget that we'll begin to discuss in coming months. So I think of note, the allocation of $1.4 million in tax relief is $600,000 or 66% more than the board allocated in either of the last two budgets, so we should feel pretty good about that. Which brings me to the second bucket of funds. This past July, we received additional state aid, as I said, in the amount of $845,449. It didn't bring us back to where we were 2 years ago, but it helps. During our July discussions, we deferred any final decision on how to use those funds at that time in order to preserve for ourselves maximum flexibility. And at this meeting, in fact, we need to make that allocation. But I think we can do that now with additional information that we didn't have in July. So as I mentioned, we're allocating much more to future tax relief than we anticipated we would back in July. And we now have concrete examples of additional expenditures that we already approved as a board over the past few months to alleviate some of the issues we're now facing or have been facing. You all should have seen Vince's memo and administrative memo number 2 in the board packet. That administrative memo number 2 is the list of items that the Finance Committee has recommended and the board will be voting on tonight to allocate to the additional state aid. And just to be clear, we're not asking the board at this time for approval, for example, to make the new hires listed. We've already done that. We've already approved the hiring. We're just simply allocating the July state aid to fund those decisions that we already made. So let me pause there because I said a lot. Let me see if we have any questions either on the first bucket of funds or the second bucket of funds and what exactly we're proposing to vote on tonight. Yeah.
So referring to Mr. Yanuro's memo, there's $183,949 out of the $845 that we are allocating in tax relief. But when we discussed that in committee, we kind of discussed that as going into this year's budget so that we would have maximum flexibility if we actually need to spend that money during this year. And the way it's written here,
Right.
it doesn't reflect that.
Unfortunately, I left my papers at home, but
Okay.
I did read them.
Here.
No. If you go to administrative memo number 2 in the board packet,
Attached to the agenda.
it's attached to the agenda. Sort of a sideways chart.
Okay.
This list adds up to the 845,449, and it's the actual allocation that that we're intending to allocate teachers. So the list you were looking at, Ann, was preliminary thoughts. By the time we sent this out, we actually are proposing that we use the state aid to, for example, to restore 5 teachers cut. So you remember the various elementary schools, there were 3 second grade teachers, a 4th grade, a 5th grade. This column adds up to the total state aid.
So there's no flexible money that we had talked about in committee.
There's no flexible money.
Well, we had talked about possibly putting some of the dollars toward technology.
Here's where the flexible money comes in. So we have to allocate the state aid dollars tonight.
Okay.
By putting, for example, the teachers in the state aid bucket, to the extent there is additional surplus in the current year budget, where those teachers were going to be funded out of the current year budget, that money can be available. So at the end of this school year, we'll do exactly what we did at the end of the last school year, which is look at what the surplus is, allocate it to capital account, allocate it to future year surplus, or along the way, we could choose to spend it on something, as you say, like technology.
At the end of the year.
No, we could decide that next month.
Okay.
We could decide to spend it on technology. The decision to put it in the future year surplus, as you know, would come at 2 times. Either when we're doing our next year's budget, we could decide to put some into that budget, or at the end of the year, we could decide to put it in the budget 2 years away.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to make sure we were maintaining a little bit of flexibility there.
I think this path actually maintains maximum flexibility again. It's because we're meeting the deadline to have to allocate funds, but to the extent there are excess funds, we can know that as we go along and allocate as we go along. Anyone else?
I have a question. So the first bucket of money, which I guess is the 3.6 minus the 2.2,
Right.
is that 1.4 to the 2012, 2013 school budget for tax relief? Is that binding on future boards, that money will go to tax relief?
It's money that, so if you actually literally picture the money, we're moving it to the next school year.
Right. But is it being?
We would have to, so we'll allocate it and likely spend it in the next school year. Then you look at next year, you look at the surplus that's available and decide if you're going to move money forward again. So I think
The
the
answer
answer,
is
if I
no.
understand your question, I think the answer is no, because a school board each year, as they approve the budget, can decide how much they're going to allocate going forward. The problem they will create for themselves if they don't allocate a similar amount of money is they'll have a hole in the next year's budget.
If I could add to it, yes, that 1.4 million is dedicated for tax relief in 2012, 2013. Because what those dollars are excess, your excess surplus account that is in excess of the 2%. You're permitted to hold in reserve
Right.
2% of your budget.
Right.
Okay? Anything over that 2% must be allocated to tax relief in the following school year.
So your answer is yes?
Yes.
Let me put your question a different way.
No.
No, let me put your question a different way so to make sure I understand it. Are you asking, can the board come along later and use that money for something other than tax relief? Is that your
Yes.
question? Absolutely not. That cannot do that. I
This
didn't
board is
I didn't
committed,
understand your
but
question.
not a future board.
Right.
So that's different.
No.
No, it's not. It's the same thing.
It's, the money that we're saying, let me be clear, the 1.4 million
Right.
that we're saying we're going to allocate to next school year's tax relief,
Over and above the 2% reserve.
over and above the 2% reserve, this board cannot change. We cannot spend that money on something else.
So it doesn't bind future boards. Got it. Okay.
No, because by the time there's another board, that money's already is already tax
gone.
relief.
It's
already
It's already
gone.
out.
You can't
Yeah,
do
that
it.
decision's
Right.
been made.
Because it's made.
Fair enough.
February.
Thank you.
So I think it's important to sort of recap what Mr. Matesic has said, is that over the last few months, this board has worked very hard and spent a lot of time discussing what our goals are for finance. And as we have worked toward those answers, tonight we can actually say we've met them. It's been brought up at this table that we needed to dedicate funds for capital improvements to our facilities, and we've done that.
Yep.
We have recognized that our taxpayers, because of the way the funding formula in the state of New Jersey works, Westfield taxpayers literally are carrying the cost of education in our town, 97 cents on every dollar. And tonight we dedicated 66% more toward tax relief. And we have maximized the flexibility with the few more dollars that we got from state aid. So we're hitting our goals. It's taking some time. It's true. It's not happening instantaneously, but it is happening.
Can I make a comment, Julian? Something that Rich and I have talked about, and I think it builds on the issue of the goals that we're trying to establish. We tend to look at things, kind of 1 year, pretty much 1 year at a time. And, I'd like to see us start looking at the next budget sooner rather than later, even if it's establishing, what the assumptions are going to be. But we know, pretty simply, the labor increase that we're going to be facing for next year based upon the various contracts that are out there. And I think that, I don't want to put work on Mr. Yanuro's plate, but I think we as a board and, in the business office should be establishing the pro forma budget for the 12-13 year now. And I totally understand that might take some work. I also understand that there are lots of assumptions that are built into that, but I think we around the table, I think the public ought to have some perspective of where we're heading. If we think that the size of the enrollment is going to grow from 6,300 to some number above that, well then perhaps there's going to be a requirement for more teachers yet again for next year. So I think to the degree that we can get some commitment around the table to do that and a timetable, put together so that we've got something to review, I think that would be really helpful.
We are beginning that process right now. We've already talked to the Finance Committee, and each time we have a Finance Committee meeting, we'll update them, and we're making progress.
And there was also some conversation, I guess, about a monthly flash, my word, of what the performance, of the district is, so that we have some better understanding as we progress during the year of where we've got benefits, overages, or underspending. So that although surprises are nice, I think, at the end of a year to see that you've got more money left in the bank than you thought, I think we might be making different decisions along the way had we known that some of those overages were going to materialize.
Let's vote. Was there any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Wait,
Okay,
So will
sorry.
that happen?
Yes, so...
We'll be getting his budget flashes?
Well, we'll get the Finance Committee budget flashes, yes.
Okay.
And it'll look a lot like what he just described.
Okay.
In terms of being able to show us where we are month by month. In a high-level way, the pluses and minuses, so we don't have surprises.
Right, okay.
Absolutely.
So let's have a vote.
Mr. Matesic?
Yes.
Mr. Finn?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman?
Yes?
Ms. Kerstad?
yes.
Mr. Slater?
Yes.
All right, I would ask the board to note the notes for the record, please. And is there any legislation report, other than Mrs. O'Neill's from earlier? All right, any unfinished business? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if this is unfinished business, but I think it's ongoing business. I was speaking with Dr. Dolan earlier today, and I had asked her if we could get a report in either at the next meeting or the next meeting on guidance. I think everyone at home knows that Dr. Charlin, our director, left unexpectedly in the summer, and I think it's very important that the board kind of monitors the situation. We did not hire another director, we went a different route, and it's a new route for us, and I'd like to know that that route is working. And I think it's particularly important at this time of year because of the college application process. We want to make sure that our seniors are getting the support that they need, and also in light of the new bullying law, which I can only imagine is putting some added work onto our counselors. So I just wanted to bring that up publicly to get it on the table to see if we can do that.
Excellent. We, the three of us meet on Monday mornings, and we plan the calendar of how we'll have superintendent's reports, so we'll add that to the list and get it scheduled.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure if we're at new business, but let's act like we are. New business. Ad hoc committee reports. Yes, sir.
So I have an ad hoc committee report of the ad hoc development committee. We met just before this meeting, and essentially two agenda items. We had a business person, parent of the children in our schools, meet with the committee and discuss kind of a new mechanism, a new vehicle whereby his company and others are thinking about having a facility where it would take the burden off boards of education to start their own 501c3s or things like that. So it's a very, very preliminary discussion. And then secondly, in terms of more fact-finding and building around the idea of additional sources of revenue, we're going to try to meet with New Jersey school boards or get an expert in their area to come and speak to our committee. And as well, we're going to ask the folks from Summit to come down. They've been open to discussing with us, so hopefully before the holidays we'll have those two data points, if you will, and then we'll recommend to the board a way to proceed, hopefully by the end of the calendar year.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Liaison reports. Yes, ma'am.
So I attended the Rec Commission meeting last night, and the first report came from the Town Council liaison. So I thought it would just be a little fun to report out that the town has had significant difficulty with the geese around the pond at Minnewascan. They have tried spraying through a company. They have tried fencing the area. They've tried putting up those wooden dogs, wolves. So yesterday, they hired some geese chasers, which are border collies that come in at regular intervals to chase the geese away. And I don't know how well it worked because yesterday afternoon I walked around the park with my class and the geese were still there. But they are going to give this a shot, and evidently other communities in town have other towns.
Darwin.
There you go.
Darwin.
There you go.
But they have been successful in some other towns, so it's worth a shot.
They work on the golf course, too.
Yeah.
We've used them on the golf course.
The
dogs, the border collies on the
I
golf
just
course.
hope my class gets to see it, because I think they do a lot of
Ghostbusters are next.
So that was, that was my fun report. Also, Bruce Kaufman from the rec department reported out two very exciting things. The first thing is that he is in receipt of our new concussion head injury policy that he will be reviewing and sending out to the user groups to ensure that the user groups that are using Board of Ed fields are adhering to the same guidelines. He also indicated that he thinks it's very important that the Rec Commission as a whole follow the policy, and I think we'll be putting it for review, hopefully to ensure that students on all fields are adhering to a similar policy to keep everybody kind of on the same page. And the other thing that he is a part of is that he is moderating an anti-bullying workshop for recreation commissions around the state this Thursday in Bridgewater. Our very own Gary Moore and Tom Rich, who's from Summit, who does a lot of talking as presentations on anti-bullying, will be the presenters, and they will be discussing the new anti-bullying law and informing the rec commissions around the state, updating them on the happenings, and have a discussion regarding how they can, positively influence the kids on the fields as well. So I was very excited to hear that because, again, same kids that we're all working with. So if we're all working from the same page, it's all the better for the kids. So that was it. And then no new news on the grant yet that has been put out jointly. Hopefully by mid-November, they're thinking we might hear back.
What about parking? Was that brought up
Parking?
on the rec commission? I'm sorry, it's rec commission. Sorry.
Yeah.
Wrong group.
We didn't
Sorry.
have parking, no. Don't ask me
My
about
bad.
parking.
Sorry. Sorry.
That's what you thought.
There's parks and there's barking, but no parking.
Sorry.
All right, anyone else? So we can recognize the public for non-agenda items. Seeing no one approach the podium, we do not have a private session this evening.
That's correct.
And so, I've forgotten how to end the meeting when we don't have a private
night.
session. We have.
Good night.
Have a pleasant tomorrow.
Motion for adjournment.
Can we have a, I make a motion to adjourn. I know, it's been so long.
Wait till Ginny comes back.
I was going to say. Where
We
is
have
our
a second.
process?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned.